My piano suite, Scenes from a South African Childhood, was written just over a decade ago, but I never actually learnt the notes at the time, and I certainly never performed the cycle until this year. And the reason that took place was because I had been invited to participate in a concert at an estate in South Africa called Old Nectar, which is situated in the Jonkershoek Valley just north of Stellenbosch. And in recent years, the wine cellar, the old wine cellar next to the main manor house of Old Nectar, has been turned into a little concert venue. And when I was asked to participate in a concert there last May, I thought, well, it would be appropriate to actually learn these pieces from my distant past, the first one of which is actually called The Gardens at Old Nectar. And this is inspired, of course, by what is now famous as a place to visit, and particularly by my recollections of growing up there when I was 3-4 years old. The second piece is entitled Princess Rainbow, which is the title of a bedtime story which my father invented and kept going for a couple of years, and was inspired by his fly fishing in the nearby river which ran through the bottom of the valley of this place, and just really told a tale about one particular fish and everything that sort of happened to her from day to day. And it's the sort of premise for this piece, which is a sort of like poor man's Ondine, if you like, for piano. The third piece is a rather surreal inspiration of a few holidays we took at a place called Baines Kloof, not far from Stellenbosch. And the subtitle of the piece is A Baboon Dance, because coming down the mountain, every time we were there, it seemed to me, this tribe of baboons would appear very silently and rather ominously, and basically it terrified me. I didn't like the look of them at all. But in this piece, it's actually quite a jolly dance, and has sort of West Indian overtones, for better or for worse. Then comes a complete contrast, a lullaby called The Blue Dressing Gown, which was simply the colour of a dressing gown which my mother wore, as far as I can remember, for those few early years. And it's a kind of portrait of her, I suppose, just as it came out the day I was composing this. Then that's followed by, again, a contrast in pace and mood, Christmas at Rose Cottage. So after our few years at Old Nectar, when my brother William was born, we moved to the other side of Stellenbosch, also to another farm and a cottage called Rose Cottage. And this is Christmas at Rose Cottage. It's a very short, rumbustious work, presumably with adrenaline going at full tilt. And 4 tiny quotes of Christmas melodies, which are fairly well hidden. Then following that is another portrait of a place. The piece is titled At Groot Drakenstein, which is an area, a small area on the other side of the Cederberg Mountains from Stellenbosch. But the property that I used to visit was called Good Hope and was lived in by an aunt and uncle. And the little quote from Mozart that you hear in the center of the piece is the 25th Piano Concerto, which is a work I discovered while staying there on one holiday. And I just remember walking along a track to a reservoir up on the mountainside with the melody that you hear in this piece playing in my head, having just heard the recording. Then, shortly after I was 6 years old, we moved to the suburbs of Cape Town, where I began school. And on the slopes of Table Mountain is a memorial to Cecil Rhodes, who the historians will know was very influential in what was then Rhodesia and South Africa. And in recent years, his reputation has come into some question. And I've subtitled this piece An Elegy, because obviously Rhodes's memory is not admired by everyone. But that being the case, nevertheless, I did visit the memorial up on the slopes of Table Mountain when I was growing up, and climbed up the great stone steps that were there. And my own personal memories of that location, at least, are very happy ones. Then penultimately, the second last piece is called Bringing in the Nets at Fishhook. Fishhook is one of the many beaches that run around the Cape Peninsula, very beautiful, in a bay, and it became our beach of choice in the summertime. And frequently they would set off in boats from the shore and bring in a huge catch of fish, and still do today. I, at the time, used to think it was good news on every occasion when the fishing took place. But of course, as an adult, I realized that actually the whole business of fishing, picturesque as it may be in those circumstances, is not good news for the fish. And a lot of them would suffer, the bigger fish anyway, would suffer very much when they were sort of brought in, thrown out of the nets and hurled up the beach to hasten their death. Anyway, that's the picture of the piece, and it runs into the last work, which is called the Fig Tree Hammock, because in our back garden in Rondebosch were a couple of, at least two fig trees, two large ones, which were used to support a hammock. My father bought an old Army and Navy surplus straw hammock, and that's where I spent many happy hours reading as a fairly young child, as far as I recall. And it's kind of another lullaby, really, an all but name, and it concludes the cycle of pieces. I'm very delighted to be able to play these pieces in this locality today. It's the Fazioli Concert Hall in Sacile in Italy, and I have one specific person to thank for the opportunity that's arisen for me to be here and play on this fabulous piano. And that is my friend Federico Kramer. I met Federico in 2019. He won the prize for a piece I'd written for the Olga Kern International Piano Competition, which had taken place in 2019 in New Mexico. And Federico is a great Fazioli supporter and a Fazioli artist. And through his kind inquiry, I was able to arrange this recording session today and play these pieces.